And we are live here on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. What's up, guys? Nick Script on the P2W Fantasy podcast here now in March of 2022 as we are trucking along in the off season. It's cool because we have some actual football events going on. A lot of people talking about the combine, the incoming prospects. But what we got going on today is I have two great guests I have yet to link up with in the fantasy football community. We're talking mailbag questions from the community. So before we kick things off, I want to make sure I introduce both guys and let them talk about what they have going on. So start things off here with Corey, co-founder of the Fantasy Stock Exchange. You guys have a YouTube channel, you have a Twitter page, you have a Patreon. You also contribute DFS for Draft Sharks. So Corey, thanks for coming on, man. Can you tell everybody where to find you first, because people will listen to this later in their cars, and then also what you got going on?
Yeah, you pretty much summed it up. Fantasy Stock Exchange over on YouTube's the bread and butter of most of our content. We're closing in on 10,000 subscribers right about now, so hopefully we can get there, I don't know, by the NFL draft or something like that. But that's pretty much where we find everything. And then we have a Patreon with our Dynasty Rankings Manifesto available, and then player cards for all these prospects, databases, and stuff like that. So patreon.com/Fantasy Stock Exchange, where you can find that. My work at Draft Sharks is during the season for the most part, but I am contributing to BDG's draft guide. For those of you that listen to Nick and everything he's got going on with his team, I'll be contributing to his draft guide as well, so you can find some of my work there also.
Awesome stuff. So for Fantasy Stock Exchange, do you guys cover redraft, dynasty, a mix of everything? How does that work for people that are not familiar?
Basically whatever the calendar dictates. Right now it's dynasty season, rookie prospect season. So that's what we're talking about. Once we get into, May and stuff, still dynasty, but June, July, August, that's when we get into redraft type of content. And then during the season, obviously that's what we're talking about for the most part.
Awesome stuff. Also on the show today, got Coach Craig, writer for True North. I just had Trav on the show not too long ago. I love the True North guys. It's one of the few other fantasy brand t-shirts I own. You also contribute to We Bet ATS Media for the Sons of Dynasty. Great guys over there, D Brown, Nate, brother Matt. All guys I have good relationships with. You cover fantasy football, NFL, DFS for both NBA and the NFL. You're super active all the time. We both are on the Stacks app. If you guys are not familiar, go check that out. Coach Craig is way more active on there than I am, but I like being a part of that too. Coach Craig, man, where can we find you, and let everybody know what you got going on? I think this is like your 15th show today, you said.
Yeah, this is a third streamer podcast today. Then I have my own NBA DFS video as well. But you can find me on Twitter at Coach Craig Sport. You can find me on YouTube at Coach Craig Sports, patreon.com/Coach Craig Sports, on the Stacks app, like you mentioned, at Coach Craig Sports as well. Just a lot of different stuff going on, a little bit of everything every day nowadays, but could be a lot worse. It was a little bit busier during the football season when there's football and basketball going on at the same time, though.
Yeah, I always respect people who dive into more than one sport, because, I try to throw out like waiver stuff for basketball, and then I see guys like yourself that are going like full-blown DFS and full-blown fantasy stuff for multiple sports. So that's always awesome to see. So before we get into the show here, as always, this show is partnered up with the Fantasy Points Media Group. Go check out fantasypoints.com/subscribe. It's a one-stop shop for all of your fantasy needs, regardless if you're playing DFS, redraft, dynasty, everything you want to see for fantasies in one spot. I'm on there every single day. Promo code is P2W22. Go check that out. Discount there. What we got going on today, again, I asked people from the fantasy community for some questions. We got a shit ton of them to cover, so we're going to try to get through as many as possible here. So stick with us on the show. It's going to be a good one.
To win, no fear to give. I feel but I can't forgive. I go all in this time, yeah, I won't regret. I'll pick the best on trip, they don't understand. I play to win, yeah, I play to win. I play to win, yeah, I play to win. I play to win, oh, play to win. I play to win, yeah, I play to win. I play to win.
All right, so we already have comments coming in from YouTube. JC said, "What's up, man? What's up, my man Craig? Always crushing it, always crushing it." So appreciate the comments. We can't see them on Twitter though, so if you are watching on Twitter, head over to YouTube. We'll put them on the screen. Love interactions with people that actually are listening to the show. So as I said before, the intro video, mailbag episode, and we're just going to read out who asked the question, what the question is, and we'll go around the room here. Feel free to disagree with each other, guys. Whatever you want to do here. It's pretty much open mic here. So the first question is from Hollywood Titan at Hollywood Titan. Hollywood's a great guy. He asks, "Who's your favorite buy low option for 2022?" So when people say buy low in fantasy, I think we can all kind of take it a different way. So whichever way you want to take buy low, whether it means the price took a hit, whether it means they don't cost that much, whatever route you want to take. We'll start things off with you, Corey. Who comes to mind as somebody to buy low potentially for 2022?
I love J.K. Dobbins. He's been a guy of mine, for the last couple of years. He was, along with Jonathan Taylor, the only running back I had a first-round grade on in that class. He was extremely efficient as a rookie. Everybody knows kind of the story by now. He averaged over 6 yards per touch, scoring 7 touchdowns over the final 8 games of 2020. Tears his ACL before the season, obviously, out for the season, along with his backfield mate, Gus Edwards. They both suffered season-ending injuries. But we saw the corpse of Devonta Freeman be relevant in this offense last year. Not only that, he was commanding 4.5 targets per game when Lamar Jackson was on the field, and he was getting, more than 50% of the snaps, and he was operating as the primary guy there. We're going to have a 23-year-old running back with, 12 months to recover coming into next season with his MVP caliber quarterback. Offensive line hopefully back healthy as well. The Ravens just got decimated by injuries all season. Andrews, Hollywood, Bateman at wide receiver, and tight end to take some attention off. This is going to be a top 5 scoring offense, in my opinion. And from a dynasty perspective, I think J.K. Dobbins is still getting the uncertainty discount just because of the injury. If it wasn't for the injury, this is a guy that I'd have right up there with DeAndre Swift, Javonte Williams, in that kind of second tier behind Jonathan Taylor among those young running backs.
I really like that pick there. He was actually, if I threw 3 guys' names on my own list, he was one of them. I've talked about him myself, and within the offseason. I like the points about Freeman because I think if we see the opportunity he had within the passing game as well, that's good signs for J.K. Dobbins, seeing one guy get some work, one guy be successful. I also like the fact that the Ravens are starting to become a little less predictable, right? They're opening up the pass game a little bit more. I think that's going to help J.K. Dobbins, in situations where maybe they don't stack the box expecting a forced run. And also, you mentioned the offense. Offense going to be in good field positions. He's going to have chances to score, and he's good at capitalizing on those chances. So I do like the J.K. Dobbins pick there. Coach Craig, same question. Who's a buy low option that comes to mind for you? And if you want to have any comments on J.K. Dobbins, have at it as well.
I'll say with Dobbins too. I love the pick of Dobbins. He's a guy I held on to throughout the season. I kept getting offers after offers after offers, and we did see more of a willingness from Lamar Jackson to be dumping that ball off to the running back position, staying in the pocket longer, and doing that as well. So I think that bodes well for him going forward. For me, I went with Devonta Smith for the Eagles. If you look back at rookie seasons, it is kind of underrated just because we've seen Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, and some of these other guys in Jalen Waddle, even if you want to throw him up there. But he still finished as wide receiver 30 in PPR this year. He had 64 catches for 916 yards and 5 touchdowns. He had 4 touchdowns that were called back due to penalty this year away from the play too. So say he gets over 1,000 yards, 9 touchdowns, we'd be talking about him in a lot different aspect here. And then you're either going to have an upgrade at quarterback or progression from Jalen Hurts. So I think it's only going to get better.
Yeah, and I like the point you mentioned with the names of Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. Like, we have these high expectations sometimes for a rookie having like a decent year versus like this groundbreaking statistical massive breakout year. So Corey, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on Devonta Smith. I think again, maybe he didn't live up to some expectations, but maybe, are the expectations a bit high? What's your thoughts on Smith?
Yeah, Smith was a guy that I thought was like the most over-scrutinized prospect coming out last year. He clearly produced at a high level, even like Craig said, in the NFL when, we're not used to seeing Chase and Jeffersons every, day. And that's why they're, all the way up at the top of the dynasty wide receiver rankings. What Devonta Smith was, in the 75th, 80th, whatever kind of percentile you want to put it into as his rookie season. I think he showed more than enough to show that he could be, a back end wide receiver 1, high end wide receiver 2 type by the second, third year of his NFL career.
All right, and I'll throw mine in there. Have a couple quick pointers on him, but there's some risks behind it, and some people have voiced recently on Twitter that they're out because of the risk. But I threw Kelvin Ridley on there, and I know that there's speculation: is he gonna play? Is he gonna come back? Is he gonna be back on the Falcons? What's that gonna look like? But I feel like a year ago, before we knew what happened, versus right now, the price differential makes me want to go grab him. People were just on another podcast. I think it was a fantasy footballers talking about a question that came in and said, "Hey, I have a mid to early second. Should I take that for Kelvin Ridley?" Or it might have been vice versa. But it's so crazy to see the shift in the value. But if we look at Kelvin Ridley, what he's done, I mean, this past season, weeks 2 through 4, he had 10 plus targets in all 3 of those games. He ranged from 14 to 19.3 fantasy points. Overall wide receiver 5 in 2020. He had 5 games of 21 plus fantasy points. He averaged 19.4 in 2020. He had 8 games of over 100 yards. So this is a guy that we know runs routes well. He commands a lot of targets. He's very productive when he's on the field for fantasy. And just seeing that shift in the value, I'm in for taking a stab, especially if you don't have to pay a lot. I was in a big analyst startup, and I got him in the 6th round, which I thought was crazy because I think before he was going in like the 3rd or 4th around there. I think so. 27 years old. I'm taking the chance, but you guys jump in. Am I off, or are you guys on the same page? What's your thoughts, Kelvin Ridley?
Yeah, no disagreements here. I think Kelvin Ridley, if he were equated to a rookie draft pick this year, if Wilson, London and Burks are off the board, he'd be my next pick at wide receiver, despite the age, obviously, discrepancy that he'd have with the other rookies. I think as high as the 105, 106 is I'd be willing up to give for him. So I know it's risky because it's off the field stuff and, mental health and all that stuff. So we have no idea what's going on in the dude's head. But if he's back on the field, which it sounds more and more like it's an Atlanta Falcons thing and not necessarily, something that is going to keep him away from football altogether, I'm definitely willing to buy. And I doubt you're going to have to pay the 105, 106 for him. You'll probably be able to get him for the, 108 to 110 type of rookie pick, if I had to guess.
Coach,
any further thoughts on Ridley?
No, I think it's pretty much what you guys said. I think it's, if you're able to get him right now, it's a pretty good thing. And you're looking more towards the back end of that first round. And if you where that risk is, there's not that much risk there this year. So it's like, you might as well take a chance on Kelvin Ridley, somebody that we've seen be a wide receiver 1 in as recently as last season. So I think there's a lot of advantage there. And then, if he's not on the Falcons anymore, if he goes to a situation that's a little bit better, maybe an upgrade at quarterback, it could be even better.
I think we're all on the same page there. We'll go to the next question. We got at Big Douglas Show. He asked, who is in a better position to regress, Burrow or Herbert? So I got a couple quick stats here, and then I'll ask your guys' opinion on this one. But fantasy finish, when I say fantasy finish, I'm looking at weeks 1 through 17. Justin Herbert, overall QB2, 22.96 points per game. Joe Burrow, overall QB5, 20.52 points per game. Herbert had 38 touchdowns, 15 interceptions. Burrow had 34 and 14 interceptions. Herbert, 5,014 passing yards. Joe Burrow, 4,611 passing yards. This has been a pretty frequent discussion in the fantasy world, is like Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert. One guy played a little bit longer this year, right? Other guy was very, very good in fantasy. So they both were. But Coach Craig, who do you see regressing, I guess, more is in a better position? I'm going off the question. Better position to regress out of these two quarterbacks?
Well, I think it depends on how you take the aspect of it too. Because if you're just talking about Herbert being the quarterback 2, it's probably more likely that he regresses just because more people pass him up next year. Like there's a higher likelihood of that to happen because some of the other quarterbacks that were behind him weren't healthy the whole year. If we get a whole year of Kyler Murray being healthy, he could surpass him with his rushing. If we get a whole year of Lamar Jackson being healthy, he could surpass him with his rushing too. But I think there's definitely a chance that both of them could regress to an extent too. Burrow, it could be if that offense line just doesn't get better. But Herbert, you also have the case that Mike Williams might not be there next year too as well.
Good points all around there. We'll shift over to Corey. What's your thoughts? Who's in a better position to regress between Burrow and Herbert?
I'll take, from a fantasy perspective, I'll take Burrow just because the line, as Craig said, it still stinks. It's probably not going to get, a whole lot better in one off season. I'm sure they're going to address it at some point, but if they suffer some injuries at wide receiver next year, because, they relatively didn't suffer any, Higgins, Boyd, and Chase all, stayed healthy for the most part. If Chase misses 4 or 5 games here and there, Higgins misses 4 or 5 games here and there, then the offensive line will probably rear its ugly head for Joe Burrow. And I think he might have a tougher time rather than if Herbert lost, Keenan Allen for a couple games. I do think Mike Williams is going to be back with the Chargers. And even if he's gone, I think they're probably going to use, some kind of heavy investment in another wide receiver, whether it's their first round pick or, another free agent or something like that. So I bet, more so on Justin Herbert to maintain his level of play and maintain his fantasy production as opposed to Burrow, I love both of these guys. They're both obviously very good quarterbacks, but I'd probably lean Herbert as the guy to, stay at the top.
All right. Going to the next one here, we got at FF Dynasty Boy. He asks, it's a long one here, but we'll break it down. He says, which wide receiver is least vulnerable to a quarterback change? And then he puts in parentheses, for examples, Adams if he stays in Green Bay, Deontay or Claypool, Judy Sutton, Patrick, etc. Which guy can still be in a great situation regardless of what happens to their quarterback? So summarize which wide receiver do you trust to not be affected as much by change if they had a change to their quarterback? So Corey, who comes to mind for you?
Yeah, and I'm assuming he's asking specifically about these teams that could experience some kind of quarterback turmoil this year. But I think it's clearly Adams, obviously, just because he's the best receiver here. And secondly would be Deontay Johnson because he's the only one among these other receivers that has shown the ability to command an elite target share. I loved Chase Claypool coming into this season. He disappointed. He didn't, he didn't take that step forward. He didn't command more targets than he saw really as a rookie. And then Judy Sutton and Patrick, those guys are all going to kind of eat into each other unless they get some kind of monster grade at quarterback, because none of those guys have really separated themselves amongst each other. We haven't seen Judy take that step forward and, become the alpha there. Even when Sutton was alone on the field with Judy not there, he was still having a lot of games where he wasn't commanding a whole lot of targets. So regardless of quarterback change, I think Adams is clearly the one that's the least vulnerable. And then Deontay Johnson probably shortly right behind him.
Yeah, I think it's a good point there. I mean, those two guys are, I think, in their own world outside of the other ones named. I mean, Judy, I still got the faith in Judy, but what have we really seen out of Judy? Sutton, he's had some nice games in the past. Personally, I mean, I don't know. I was kind of discouraged this year, and with Claypool, little disappointing, especially when Juju was out of the mix there. But these other two guys, Devonta Adams, I think many people still regard him as the most talented wide receiver. Maybe some people say he's top 3, but he's top 3, right? And then with Deontay Johnson, a lot of people have mentioned, well, maybe the next quarterback won't look for him as much as Big Ben. But if we're really going to say that a change away from Big Ben is going to, kill this guy who's been very good at getting open and actually been, an improved pass catcher, I think that's it's a little bit of a stretch there. But Coach Craig, what's your take on this as far as guys that might have changed quarterback rooms and still being successful?
Yeah, so the answer is pretty much the same for me. The thing is, like with Devonta Adams, we've seen him be still successful with Brett Hundley at quarterback, and we like to assume that Jordan Love is better than Brett Hundley, at least at this point. We would like to assume that. I'm not sure that's a guarantee, but we'd like to assume that at least. And then Deontay Johnson, we've seen him be somewhat relevant with Mason Rudolph at quarterback, his rookie season. So definitely those two are the ones that really stand out there. And Denver, you hope that the quarterback situation gets better. So as compared to the other ones that maybe get worse, you could argue if Pittsburgh actually gets worse or not, but that's a whole nother story for a different day.
I was about to say we can turn that into a whole separate podcast right there. This question made me think of one of my guys the last year or two, so I want to make sure I shout him out. He's not to the same level as Devonta Adams. He's not. But I want to shout out Brandon Cooks, man. I want to shout out Brandon Cooks because when we talk about a changing quarterback situation, this guy has known that his entire career. He jumped from the Saints to the Patriots to the Rams to the Texans. And I know he's had Drew Brees and Tom Brady and Deshaun Watson, but he's also had Jared Goff and then Tyrod Taylor and Davis Mills. I don't think having Davis Mills and Tyrod Taylor for any wide receiver, if you had them for fantasy before the season, knowing that you probably were a little bit nervous, but for Brandon Cooks, still balled out. He's had 6 of his 8 seasons over 1,000 receiving yards, 6 of his 8 seasons with 114 plus targets. He's mostly been inside the top 20 for fantasy for most of his career. So if we talk about changing quarterback rooms, I always think about Brandon Cooks, one of my guys. But yeah, good points all around. Next question for my guy, Shotgun Fantasy at Shotgun Fantasy. Who is the bigger dynasty trap going into 2022? Is it Dalton Schultz or Amon-Ra St. Brown? And I'm just going to spit out a bunch of stuff and then ask you which guy comes to mind for this question. So Amon-Ra St. Brown, if we count week 18, Amon-Ra scored 23.5 or better fantasy points in 5 out of 6 of his last games, with the outlier being 15.3. So I'm talking about PPR scoring here. Weeks 15 through 17, a.k.a. the fantasy playoffs. Not only was he the wide receiver 1, but he was a second highest scoring player behind Joe Burrow during those weeks. And then we look at Dalton Schultz, tight end 4 overall, weeks 1 through 17. He averaged 12 fantasy points. He had a lot of success working up the middle of the field, right, with those other guys in the system. 4 fantasy weeks above 17 fantasy points. He's going to be a free agent, which can mean many different things. But we'll start with Coach Craig on this one. Who is the bigger dynasty trap between these players?
A lot of this just comes down to ADP, where you're drafting with and who you're drafting with too. Because I know Amon-Ra keeps going up and up and up and up and up, so part of me wants to say that just based on the ADP. Part of me wants to say Dalton Schultz too, if he ends up leaving Dallas, because I don't think the situation for him is going to be much better anywhere else he goes. It could be a little bit of an Austin Hooper effect as well.
Yeah, I was actually speaking of Austin Hooper. I tweeted out something today that is the 2021 Jonnu Smith the new worst case scenario for tight ends because of what happened with him. But
don't bring up Jonnu Smith, man.
Yeah, I'm triggering a lot of people with that today. Maybe yourself included, Corey. What's your thoughts on this?
It's got to be the tight end for me. Tight end in general is the theme and trend for middle tier tight end 1 production. So not the elite guys. It varies year over year. We think about the guys who it was last year. It was Schultz. It was Knox. It was, these guys in the middle tier of tight end 1s. And then 2 years ago, it's completely different names. Logan Thomas, Robert Tonyan, Jonnu Smith, Jared Cook, Hunter Henry. 2 years, again, 2 years before that, it's Jared Cook and, all these different guys. It just varies really, a lot year over year. If he's back in Dallas, he could be good again for fantasy, but it would really not shock me if he's the tight end 16 in points per game at this time, a year from now. We're like, oh, Dalton Schultz was a complete bust. I know, Amon-Ra St. Brown is the more expensive piece in this, question, and he's the one that's going to, cost you more if he is in fact the dynasty trap, but he proved the ability to command volume, which is really all you can ask for out of a rookie wide receiver. Yeah. Swift and Hawkinson were off the field for the majority of the time, and they might add more receiving talent around him, but the bottom line is he did it. It's the same thing I said about Brandon Ayuk last year when everybody was, talking about how Debo was off the field and, Kittle was off the field. Obviously that kind of proved to be true, but that's just because those guys are phenomenal, not anything to do with Brandon Ayuk.
You still got to make the plays at the end of the day, right? Against NFL defenses. So I think a lot of people, look for the reasons why somebody's successful without actually noting that they were successful at getting open and catching the ball and scoring touchdowns. So I think there's a lot of good points in that. Obviously a price difference between these two guys, but you mentioned, Schultz with the potential. Could he be, tight end 5 or could he be tight end 16? And what is tight end 16 average a game? 7 points or something like that for the tight end position. I think that's a good point in itself. And again, we mentioned Jonnu Smith. Could he go down that path and end up being in a really bad situation, or could he, land with Justin Herbert in, Los Angeles? So there's a big variety of range for that one too. But that's good points all around there. Next one is from my buddy Kevin, my co-host during the season at @DuBois_22. Yes. What is your favorite dynasty startup draft strategy? So he's asking, when you're joining a new dynasty league and you're in that dynasty draft, what's a good strategy to have? Corey, what comes to mind for dynasty startup draft strategy?
I know the simple answer that a lot of people probably already know about because Dynasty's been around long enough is trading down in the startup. A lot of people know that, you should probably try and trade down, acquire, 2023 first because it's supposed to be a very good class. I like to just put it, kind of simply that I like to acquire value, whether that's trading up or down. So knowing where your tier breaks are, especially at quarterback and super flex leagues, that's definitely huge. And maintaining flexibility. So if you're at the, tail end of the first round in your startup draft, and you could start your draft off with a bunch of young foundational players, that is what I'm looking to do. So I'm not really usually looking to take, Nick Chubbs and Dalvin Cooks, who are already in their primes. That kind of pigeonholes you into trying to compete right away. If you go with DeAndre Swift and Javonte Williams at the 1-2 turn, then you can pivot yourself to a, rebuilding type of strategy and then look to trade down, acquire future draft capital, and move on from there. Or if you realize the rest of your league mates are taking all the young wide receivers and, Mike Evans, Keenan Allen, all these guys that are in their primes already are just sliding down the board, then you have young running backs and also, win now type of wide receivers to help yourself compete. So maintaining flexibility, especially in the early rounds, is my favorite dynasty strategy by far. Usually it's acquiring young wide receivers, young quarterbacks, and young running backs early.
A lot of good points there. And one of the early points I liked was the tiers point, because I feel like that helps you realize like where you are in the draft. Like if I have these 3 wide receivers in the same tier and I'm really targeting one, but none of them get taken, then I don't have to trade up necessarily, right? Maybe I can trade down, or maybe I can, address a different position. I think reading the board's important too, but I don't want to ramble here. Coach Craig, what comes to mind dynasty startup draft strategy?
Yeah, I think a lot of Corey said was pretty spot on for me as well. I'm always trying to move back for the most part, acquire value or picks. And especially if I was doing like a startup right now, I'd try to begin as many 2023 picks as I could. There was a startup about 2 years ago. I actually had like the 4th pick and I just moved down. I didn't even draft a single player till the 4th round, where I ended up taking J.K. Dobbins, and I ended up owning 11 of the first 18 picks in the rookie draft the next year. So, and my quarterbacks were pretty set up. So I ended up with like Devontae Williams, Najee Harris. I ended up with ETN, who I flipped him for like DJ Moore plus something else too. So like if you can load up on like one draft class, especially if that draft class is a talented one too, you have more shots. So even because not everybody's going to hit, first of all, but you have more shots to get those guys. And then even once you have those guys, either before that with the pick becoming more valuable, or once you draft the player and somebody else really likes the player, then it becomes more valuable as well. And then for me also, I find myself in more of like a modified zero RB approach too, because I don't really value running backs too highly, like in startup drafts. I'm trying to kind of build my quarterbacks, try to build my young wide receivers, and then just draft running backs in like rookie drafts in the coming years.
Yeah, I don't usually touch running backs after like round 3 or 4, because they're all gone, all the good ones. And then you're deciding between Damian Harris and, a young wide receiver that's going to hold their value a lot longer. And, give me the young wide receiver at that point. The one thing I will caution people to do is, again, like you mentioned, if you can trade down and acquire future draft capital, that's all well and good. But the problem is that strategy is becoming a little cliche now. And I feel like every startup that I'm in, at least, and again, this depends on knowing your league and, who you're drafting with, but everybody gets on the clock and they go, who wants this pick? I'm looking to trade down, but nobody's looking to trade up. So at that point, it almost makes sense to trade up, because people are going to sell low on this. If the whole, draft strategy, the entire 12 people in the draft is to sell their draft picks and, move down the board, then it's worth it for you to give up a 2022 second or something like that to go up and get, Trey Lance at quarterback when there's a tier break of the young quarterbacks off the board. And I really do think a lot of people will make that mistake of only looking to trade down, because it is, very popular jargon for us types to talk about trading down all the time. But a lot of people are catching on to it. So I would, caution you to know your league and know who you're drafting with. If it's guys from the office that, don't follow dynasty content at all, that strategy will work perfectly. But if you meet them in a Discord, like, the Fantasy Stock Exchange Discord, they probably know that, because we talk about it all the time. So then you got to modify your strategy a little bit.
Yeah, that reading the room is huge. I totally agree with that, because you might go in with a certain strategy, and sometimes the strategy looks good on paper, and it was completely unnecessary to make these moves to get this guy, or to go down and grab value later when it wasn't even necessary to do so. But then again, I was in a startup draft with some really nice analysts. I was with I don't know, I can spitball these guys' names off, but the amount of moves that were being made, you kind of had to figure out your strategy like on the spot right there, just because guys were trading up and guys were trying to get future picks as soon as round 1, and it was interesting to see. But knowing the room, kind of playing the board and seeing how the draft is going, Also, what you think's going to happen is probably not going to happen in the draft. So just having your pivots, that's important too with the dynasty startups. But that's again, a whole podcast can be featured on that because there's so many different routes to go with that. I like that question a lot. Next question on the list here. My guy Troy King at T King Mode, he asked, who are some sleeper tight ends for 2022? We mentioned tight ends earlier; they can really range year to year. I'll kick things off here, and I wanted to be like a Bears homer and talk about Cole Kmet or something a little bit here, but I'm going to go to Houston, and I'm going to mention Brevin Jordan. So his first snaps were week 8. So if you looked at weeks 8 through 17, here's some of his weekly finishes for the tight end position, which again, it might have been 10 points. It might have been 20 points, but this is how it looked. Week 8, tight end 5. Week 12, tight end 12. Week 14, tight end 6. Week 16, tight end 11. So from weeks 8 through 17, he had a handful of tight end 1 finishes, which I think is impressive for a rookie in a kind of tricky situation. He had 3 touchdowns during that span as well. Miami, where he came from in college, he was really good after the catch. If I look back, I think I had him as my tight end 2 out of the class, and we know Big Pat was a really nice tight end this year. So Brevin Jordan, I think the opportunity is there with the Houston Texans. I mean, right now, as of today, there's Cooks, there's Nico Collins, and maybe Cooks is not there. We're not sure, but with the situation wide open, having flashes of tight end 1 finishes, I'm going to go with Brevin Jordan as a sleeper here. But Coach Craig, any thoughts on Brevin Jordan? Then go into your guy.
Yeah, so he was on my list. I put not a homer pick behind it because unfortunately I am a Texans fan. So, but we've seen a lot of their offense not push the ball down the field very much this year, dump off to the running backs, dump off to the tight ends, throw kind of short passes too. So we'll see if that's still kind of the way with Davis Mills next year. I'm assuming he's the quarterback. Brevin Jordan was actually the number 1 high school recruit coming out of, or number 1 college recruit coming out of high school. He was actually 1 spot above Kyle Pitts too. So not everybody knows that.
There you go.
But, he obviously had a pretty good career at Miami. Didn't test quite as well as some people thought. He's kind of, they kind of brought him along slowly too. And I believe he's the only tight end under contract for the Texans next year. I know Farrell Brown is going to be a free agent. I know Jordan Akins should have been cut anyways, but that's a whole other story for a different day. And most people don't realize how old Jordan Akins actually is. He's like 29 years old already because he played professional baseball for about 3 years before he went to UCF. So, I have 2 tight ends here that I'll list, and they were both rookies this year too. So Kylan Granson for the Colts, Jack Doyle, Mo Cox, they're both free agents at this point in time. He has some athletic upside, still kind of developing as a tight end because he played. So let's see, because it was SMU the last 2 years he was at, correct?
Yep.
And he played a wide receiver at Rice 2 years before that. I always get those 2 mixed up because he played wide receiver for 2 years, then he went and transferred there and played tight end. So I think he's got a lot of upside there, depending on how they use him, depending on who comes in at quarterback, depending if they add to that tight end room. Obviously, they're going to add somebody, but if it's better competition than him. And then the other one I do have was kind of a weird one this year. It was Hunter Long for the Dolphins.
Oh, you took my dude, man.
I don't think
I like it.
I don't think Gesicki's coming back. And personally, I feel like Gesicki's one of the biggest traps in Dynasty right now. Because the dude is not a real tight end. He played less than 10% of his snaps in line this year. He literally played slot and wide receiver the whole year. So I feel like he's a major trap, and this is probably going to be the best year he's ever going to have too. But Hunter Long was just really weird this yeyear because there's games where he'd play some, and then he'd be healthy scratch, and then just back and forth all year with him. And God, I think it was Adam Shaheen. Him and Adam Shaheen went back and forth the whole year. But I think he has some upside there. Obviously, if that offensive line doesn't get much better, there's going to be a lot of quick, short passing once again, though.
Yeah, Hunter Long was my tight end too last year. Unfortunately, higher than Pat Freiermuth, which didn't age very well. But Hunter Long, to me, all he did in college was command targets. So I really liked, if he has to fill Mike Gesicki's role, I assume that's why they drafted him, because they didn't want to re-sign Mike Gesicki. Then I think he would do a good job. He played a lot from the slot in college as well. He could just, absorb that, 6 to 7 target per game role that we saw to Mike Gesicki for most of the year. I don't know if he's necessarily going to do that in year 2 because he didn't do a whole lot his first year. It's not like he's, a wide receiver and we're expecting more out of him, but he was more of a deep sleeper. My actual sleeper is a guy that a lot of people were very, very high on last year, similar to J.K. Dobbins, suffered a season-ending injury. I think Irv Smith could bounce back big time. all the hype coming into last year kind of already has come and gone. People kind of forgot about him. You have Kevin O'Connell coming in, who runs, at least more of a pass-friendly scheme, more of a pass-heavy scheme than what we were used to in Minnesota. And the offensive coordinator coming in as a former tight ends coach. I don't know what that all means, but it could mean more, targets and more snaps for Irv Smith. At the end of 2020, when Kyle Rudolph was still there, we saw Irv Smith assert himself as the starting tight end. He's still an athletic dude who could be this year's like Dawson Knox, a young player that everybody forgot about, comes out in a what we expect to be a good offense with, Jefferson, Cook, and Cousins and all those guys there. Young tight end kind of comes out of nowhere and is able to produce for fantasy. I like Irv Smith as a guy that you could probably get. I think there was another question that asked a player you could trade a 3rd round pick for. I think Irv Smith is a guy, if you need a tight end, that you could probably get for a late 3rd round rookie pick as well.
Coach Craig, any thoughts about Irv Smith?
Yeah, that was a good one. I think I almost put him down as one of my breakouts for 2022, just because like we saw that flash at the end there. They're probably I think they'll go back to using more 2 tight end sets again too. And he's a guy that can play a little bit in the slot and everything too. And even with the knee injury, it was a torn meniscus. It wasn't like an ACL where it's like a 9 to 12 month recovery period. It's a shorter period than that. So he should be good to go right from the start next year.
I think what you look for in tight ends a lot of times, if you check the boxes of being very athletic and profiling as a pass catcher, then that stands out to me. So I'm with the Irv Smith call. I've been a fan of his too. Obviously, you wanted the separation from Kyle Rudolph when he got it, got injured, but again, he profiles as that guy who can handle lining up in some different places and handling some volume. So I do like that pick as well. This one, we can go through this one quick. This is a non-fantasy question here. So this is my brother. It's his birthday today, so shout out to Anthony. But he when we have some sodas and have some friends over, he asks this question when he's feeling good sometimes. But at FF Tyler O asks, "What's the largest animal you'd feel comfortable beating in a fight? What's the smallest animal you wouldn't fight?" So it's a 2-part question. Just give me one of these answers. So the largest animal you can beat in a fight, or the smallest animal you wouldn't fight. Coach Craig, what's your answer for either one of these questions? Unless you just can quick fire spit out both, whatever you want to do.
Yeah, no, this is a weird question.
Analysis.
I really don't want to fight any animal.
Yeah, there you go. All right, so that's your answer is no animal?
Yeah, I'd rather just not fight any animals.
All right, so Coach Craig is opting out of the animal fighting season. Corey, what about yourself, man?
Yeah, Craig went with the PETA answer there. I'd probably say largest animal. I don't know, man. I'm not very scrappy with animals. They kind of screw with me a little bit. So I'd say give me like a squirrel or something. Like I'm not trying to mess around and fight like a coyote or something like that. I think that's a little bit too crazy. Smallest animal that I absolutely would not fight. Opossum, whatever you want to call them.
That was my answer.
Those things are vicious. That thing will rip your face off. That's a small animal, but it'll kill you. So I ain't fighting one of those.
Those things, like we had one that ran up to our back kitchen door one time, and I'm like flashing my phone, almost shit my pants because you see this thing with like fangs and like hands, and they like hiss at you all the time. That was my answer. I would not want to fight a possum. I think people over exaggerate the largest animal that they could fight.
Yeah, they're like, I could fight a baby panda bear or something. I'm like, you get your head taken off.
No, exactly. They're like, yeah, a small brown bear or something like that. I'm like, no, you would not. You would not. You wouldn't fight the small guy at the bar. You wouldn't fight a small brown bear. So that's a interesting question. Go ahead.
Have you ever heard the story of how Arian Foster said he could fight a wolf?
No.
You just look it up sometime. There's a bunch of videos about it, but like it was a couple years back, and he like was legit about it. He's like, I could take a wolf.
I mean, he's a large man, but I mean, what he cares about and what the wolf cares about are probably two very different things. When it comes again.
Did you see there was like an article about some guy who fought off a lion that was attacking his wife or something like that? And Mike Gundy, who's the head coach, I can't remember what college he's the head coach of, but he just quote tweeted the tweet and just said, "Compete." It was like the funniest thing I've ever seen. This guy just fought a lion off of his wife, and this college coach is just like, yeah, that's the type of dude I want manning my fullback position.
Jeez, sign this guy now. All right, back to some fantasy football here. So at Duchesne's _ asks, best running back target at the moment. And I know we've mentioned J.K. Dobbins already. I'm not sure if that was going to be someone's answer again or a different answer. I'm going to spit out mine, and then I'll let you guys answer, but you guys let me know if I'm off, right? Because he's a very polarizing player right now. Now there's reports that he could be traded, and there's like a bunch of turmoil there, and he did not look great on the field. I'm talking about Saquon Barkley. I think that his price, again, I always, for Dynasty, I look at what's priced today versus tomorrow, or what's priced today versus what it used to be. And I think Saquon Barkley having, 2 injury-riddled seasons after having 2 seasons above 1,000 rushing yards, and seeing this guy catch a crazy amount of passes in his rookie season, and we know the athletic ability. We've seen him at his peak, maybe not his peak, maybe we've seen him at his highs, I guess, for performances. Again, didn't look great this year. The situation is a little murky. And to me, when we all thought a year ago or 2 years ago, when he was healthy, that Saquon Barkley was the Dynasty RB1 or maybe the Dynasty RB2, and for him to shift on a lot of people's rankings to like RB 12 to 14, I think that opens again a window where I'm interested, because I think if he can shift back to even a glimpse of what he was before, then it's worth it for me to get him as my RB2 in Dynasty, because he probably wasn't on my team already. So I'm going to go with Barkley just because of all these weird question marks. A lot of people are out right now, and I've seen the dual threat running back in the past. But Corey, I'm shifting to you. You can tell me I'm crazy. You can agree, and then let us know your running back target.
So I'll give my actual running back target after, but I'm going to group another running back in with the Saquon Barkley discussion, because Christian McCaffrey is the same exact case. Elite running back, injuries, whatever. Saquon Barkley was being ramped up from the ACL. They said they were going to do it. It happened at the beginning of the season. He started off, 40, 50% of the snaps. By game 3-4, he was back up to his normal workload. He was back up to a workhorse running back on the field, all 3 downs, pass protection, receiving work, everything his. And then he suffered another injury. And everybody might be like, oh, classic Saquon Barkley getting injured again, but that's classic every running back. Every running back gets injured all the time. So, in fact, there's a strategy around not drafting running backs, because running backs get injured all the time. So, if you don't like the fact that Saquon Barkley gets injured, I mean, the same concerns for injuries were what we said about Joe Mixon and Austin Eckler coming into this year, who both finished as top 3 running backs. So, it really is luck of the draw with these running backs if they're going to get injured or not. So Saquon Barkley and Christian McCaffrey are 2 guys that when they're on the field are going to get full workloads, and in McCaffrey's case is going to break fantasy football.
Absolutely with McCaffrey. I think some people are catching on and saying he can finish as the running back 1 again in this coming season. Some people you continuously see all the time to say that he's injury prone and he does nothing but get hurt. So there's this weird back and forth all the time, and sometimes in your own Dynasty league, you're going to have the current manager is going to be one way or the other, and probably not much in between. But was that your pick, or did you have a different guy?
Real quick on the ticky-tacky injuries, we can't predict them, right? Like ankles and the knees and stuff. Like, as long as Saquon had the major injury, obviously, but as long as we're not talking about Cam Akers' Achilles here, like, there is no medical backing to people fading Christian McCaffrey outside of the fact that he has a big workload and is therefore more likely to get injured. But that's basically my thoughts on him. I took this question in a bit of a different direction because it just said RB target. Yeah. I think Tyler Algiere is going to blow up the combine in the next coming days. And he's a guy, if you have your rookie draft before the NFL draft, is a guy that I'm willing to invest in, because I think he's going to get drafted on the first 2 days of the NFL draft. And if he, if he does, then he's going to skyrocket up to the Trey Sermon, Michael Carter range, where those guys were going last year at the back end of the first round, early second round. But right now you can get him, mid to late second round, sometimes even in the third round. We're talking about, a 220 plus. This guy's all of 220. He played linebacker most of his career at BYU. The chase down punch out, I'm sure everybody's seen it, that Tyler Algiere did to a defensive back that was trying to return a pick 6, is impressive. He's all of that size. He's going to run fast. He can catch the ball. He has a lot of receiving production. He was able to make people miss in college. Contact balance off the charts. Pass protection off the charts. Everything about this dude screams he can do everything well. And the guy that I said that about last year happened to be the best rookie pick after the second round in Elijah Mitchell, who was my RB5 in the class. So I'm going to stick to my guns.
I was about to say, he's saying right there, I got receipts. This is Corey's guy here. Coach Craig, any thoughts on anybody mentioned, and then shift into your pick?
Oh man, I love Tyler Algiere. He's actually on my list as one of my guys too. So, and supposedly there's a rumor that he runs sub 4.4. I don't know if I believe that, but he's still
if he runs
pretty
4.5 flat at 225. I don't really care what. Like that's weighted adjusted speed score above 100. I don't really care if he doesn't need to run 4.3 for me to like him. I would have liked him if he ran 4.55 at 225.
Yep.
Enough said.
And I think I like that you brought up the pass catching thing too, because he's very underrated in that area. And even the biggest thing I want to see this year is, okay, Zach Wilson's gone. So now what are you going to do? Like, is it going to change? And they lost like 3 offensive linemen too. So they lost Brady Christensen and 2 guards. So what is this going to look like once you're done? Came out, played even better, and had like 23 rushing touchdowns. So I'm all on board on him. And another running back target I like in the rookie drafts too right now, I like Isaiah Spiller just because everybody's so hyped up on Breece Hall and everybody's so hyped up on Kenneth Walker right now. So I think there could be some value with that, especially by the time we get around to draft season.
I have Spiller as my RB1 and Algiere as my RB3 right now. So, and I think Algiere is a better prospect all around than Kenneth Walker, legitimately. So that's kind of my thoughts on those guys. And then I'll let you take it away, Nick.
That's you know what, you guys are ahead of me with. I got a notebook that I've been writing like notes, a little here, a little there, the last like handful of weeks. My computer's about to die. No, I'll plug it in a second. But you guys are a little bit ahead. Next question, and I'll go straight to Coach Craig while I go get my charger out of my bag. But it's at Nate Polvo. Happy birthday to him as well. Where are you guys at on Davis Mills? And this is your hometown hero right here. But go into that. Go ahead. I'll be back.
This is the hard one for me because Davis Mills was a guy I was not high on coming into last year's draft. I thought they reached on him. I was on live stream face palming when they picked him. First of all, I had a lot of questions about him. It was better than I thought, but Pep Hamilton is the QB whisperer. So it'll be interesting what happens this year. I feel like they're obviously going to give him a year to see what happens and then kind of go from there. But I'm not trying to go out and put him on any of my dynasty teams at this point in time, at least.
So much Bucks disrespect there. Not only did you call your quarterback coach the QB whisperer, which everybody knows is the Bucks head coach, and 2, you didn't draft Kyle Trask. That's who we drafted. You were facepalming when you drafted Davis Mills. I had to watch my team draft Kyle Trask. But anyway, Davis Mills, he showed enough that he's going to get another crack at the starting job. I think he's a 1-year rental for a dynasty roster. I don't think he's going to win the job long term. Maybe he surprises. He obviously was very talented coming out of high school. He was like a 5-star recruit. But I just don't think he has what it takes to be a relevant fantasy quarterback or hold down an NFL job.
I think if you're in a super flex league, right, if he's your QB3, maybe he fills in 1 week. But if you stacked up on quarterbacks, you might have somebody knowing that they're going to play this next season, willing to pay you something that you can actually utilize, because you probably won't start Davis Mills in your lineup on a given week, right? Even if he has a decent week. I had some rant, so I was doing some data dives, right? And I was looking at quarterback upside, and it was 2 different categories. It was passing upside, what we can look for, and rushing upside. And I was looking at the passing upside and looking at the amount of games quarterbacks had 300 plus passing yards. And it was interesting to see that Mills had 4, which was more than Mac Jones, Ryan Tannehill, Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, and it was tied with Aaron Rodgers and Matt Ryan. So it was interesting to see. He had some decent games this year. So to your point, I think he's going to get another crack. Another part of that passing upside. I looked at quarterbacks with 3+ touchdowns. How many weeks did a quarterback have 3 or more touchdowns? He had 2 of those, which is more than guys like Derek Carr and Jimmy G and Jalen Hurts. So, I mean, he had a little bit of passing upside. So I think he did earn himself a job. So, we're thinking next year and then probably done, or any chance of him being a long-time starter?
He'd really have to take a big step up, I feel like. And going back, coming out of high school, he was the number 1 quarterback recruit coming out of high school, 1 spot above Tua. So that was the biggest thing, like really for him coming into the draft last year, because he really only made 11 career starts at Stanford. And so like, I thought he should have stayed in school, but it turned out all right. It seems like they built the offense around him kind of trying to suit his strengths and not make him trying to make too many reads and too many decisions, which sometimes was a struggle for him at Stanford.
Yeah. And my biggest DFS win of the year was a Davis Mills, Brandon Cooks with Michael Pittman on the way back. Yeah, it was my biggest DFS win of the year. And I had Davis Mills in my DFS article as my tournament play in large field. And I got I think it was like $500, $600.
Jeez,
that banked like a top 10 finish in one of the tournaments. But Davis Mills, again, I wish he was the Bucs quarterback right now because I got to deal with Kyle Trask potentially. But that's where I'm at on him for sure. 1 year rental. He's also really good if you want to throw him into a trade, because I do think he's a little overvalued in Dynasty right now because people are talking themselves into him being the long-term solution there, which I think is maybe 10-15% chance of happening because this, regime didn't draft him. They're not there or whatever. So I think if Davis Mills, you can throw him in plus a second round pick and go buy low on like Zach Wilson instead, I think you're probably in a much better situation there.
Absolutely, versus just holding him as your quarterback 4 or something in a super flex league. But I like that. I like that DFS call right there, because it's not like you're like, I won a bunch of money. I stacked Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs, or I stacked Mahomes and Kelsey, and I won a bunch of cash. You literally just flexed. I stacked Davis Mills and Brandon Cooks. I like
sub 1% Davis Mills too.
Just rolling with it. I love it. All right, last question, and we can just run through this one quick because I want to make sure we close things out and let everybody know again where to find you guys. At Wyatt BFF. It's at Wyatt B_FF. Who's your favorite player in Dynasty that can be bought for a third-round rookie pick or less? Corey, you did mention Irv Smith earlier. I'm going to throw out a point to attack some trades before free agency hits, because when guys land on new teams, there's a bunch of wide receivers that are probably decent flex plays, right? So if you had a late third, this is a guy I threw down. Maybe it's a long shot, but I threw like Russell Gage down. If I had like a late third that maybe is in a 1 quarterback league and I just threw it out there, or a mid third, and you look at the teams like Lions, Eagles, Patriots, Falcons, Bears, Browns, Jags, Dolphins, Saints, Commanders, they all need wide receivers. And one of these free agents guys that costs nothing right now lands on one of those teams, their value is going to take a little bit of a bump. So maybe target a free agent that, is not Chris Godwin or something like that. That's what I wrote down. But rant over. Coach Craig, who comes to mind?
So this one could kind of be based off what you're saying too. And I think it's a guy that a lot of people are frustrated with. It's a guy that missed most of last year with injury. It's Will Fuller. If you go back to 2 years ago, wide receiver 8 in PPR points per game. And if you did like a startup last year and you drafted Will Fuller, you probably don't want him on your team because of last year. So I think there's a decent chance that you can still get him for like a 3rd round pick at this point in time. And just because people, and yes, there's the injury history there. 1 year he missed, I think it was 9 games from the ACL, which was a cheap shot by a Dolphins defender after he crossed the pylon. Then the year after that, he had the hamstring issues, which is common after having an ACL, is having some of those soft tissue leg injuries. And then he had the good year, but then there was the PEDs, obviously the suspension for that. And then he came back last year, had a weird break in his finger. Dolphins, there was something going on in that Dolphins front office too. And he's just like, I don't want to be there essentially too. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. If you can get him as a buy low right now, like he's going as like wide receiver 63 in Dynasty ECR right now, according to Fantasy Pros. So probably could get him for a 3rd round pick.
There you go.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great call. Will Fuller, like you said, he was like a legit difference-making wide receiver in fantasy, not just like a guy that you could flex. Like he was a top option in fantasy when Deshaun Watson was on the field. I don't know what Will Fuller's got left in the tank as far as injuries. I don't know if he's ever going to be back with Deshaun Watson again. But what I do know is at the late 3rd round, you're probably not getting anything of value anyway. So if you can get a guy like Will Fuller, I actually, before the season started, I traded Will Fuller and Nico Collins for Rashad Bateman, which I think probably worked out pretty well. I actually then flipped Rashad Bateman plus Mac Jones for Justin Fields in a 3rd round pick. So I got some investment in your Chicago boy in one of my dynasty leagues. But one other guy that I want to just throw out quickly as a guy that I could buy for a 3rd round pick. I just watched Sam Howell's 2020 tape, and I don't know how De'Ami Brown was so bad his rookie year. I honestly don't understand. He was my wide receiver 6 in the class. I had him and Amon-Ra St. Brown back to back in my rankings. I had both of them ahead of Rondell Moore and Terrace Marshall and those guys were towards the latter half of my rankings. I thought De'Ami Brown was going to come in, make a big impact in Washington. There was targets available with Logan Thomas, especially going down. Curtis Samuel not playing at all this year. He had the opportunity. He face planted, but a late third round pick on a wide receiver prospect that had a good profile, was productive in college, and is going to get a quarterback upgrade most likely this year. I don't think he's ever going to become an elite wide receiver, but he was a guy that I pegged as kind of like a deep threat anyway. So if he can work alongside Terry McLaurin as like a flex play, they turned, Ron Rivera and his staff had turned Curtis Samuel into like a flex play in the past. And I know Curtis Samuel is still there, but I do think De'Ami Brown can have some value as like a wide receiver 3. I think he's a great pick in late round of best ball as well.
Yeah, I think if you weigh, again, mid to late third, what that can be, the mystery box that's like a mini shoebox, or a guy that you already had faith in, you go with the guy you had faith in. That might profile as just a flex play, but we need those flex plays for depth and for occasional usage anyways in Dynasty. So I'm down for that. That's especially with the third round picks, man. I think a lot of people think they're going to grab, the again, Elijah Mitchells, or in some one quarterback leagues, we saw like Gibson back in the day going like early third round, but it's less likely for that to actually be a thing, But hey, we're getting close to the hour mark here. Really good show, guys. I like doing the mailbag show once every couple of weeks, because I feel like too often we get caught up talking about the same stuff over and over again. So I like to ask the community, like, what are you guys thinking? Like, what needs to be answered? So thank you guys if you submitted questions, if you listened. I want to go around the room one more time. We'll start with you, Corey. Again, where can we find you, and anything you want to plug that's coming up for you?
Yep. Twitter's at Football Stock. Exactly how it sounds. YouTube, Fantasy Stock Exchange. We got some exciting news. I'm not actually at liberty to divulge that news yet. I'll let my partner do that when that time comes, but it'll be really exciting. So stay tuned for that. Like I said, Fantasy Stock Exchange on YouTube. We're approaching 10,000 subscribers pretty soon. Appreciate if you guys haven't checked this out, go ahead and do that. I dropped the Tale of the Tape series video for Sam Howell today, breaking down everything from his fantasy outlook. I'm pretty sure a lot of people are going to be surprised with what I said about him, because he is currently my quarterback 1 in the class. Anyway, the YouTubes, like I said, Patreon's in the description of my Twitter. If you go there, there's a link tree with my Patreon and sponsors and all that kind of stuff that you can check out.
All right. And Coach Craig, again, where can we find you, and anything you want to plug?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at Coach Craig Sport, on YouTube at Coach Craig Sports, patreon.com/Coach Craig Sports. I'm going to be working on a lot of stuff. Obviously, there's a True North fantasy football, doing some writing there for fantasy football, probably more so during the off season. We Bet ATS is where I'm doing some basketball writing, actually. So before the trade deadline, I wrote about a couple of different players that could be traded for each team. Probably going to be doing something when we get closer to the playoffs too, talking about that. Obviously, daily NBA DFS videos on my YouTube channel. Going to be doing some more draft prospect stuff in the coming probably shouldn't say coming days, the coming weeks. So I'm actually off to the NFL Combine tomorrow morning, so I'm going to go there, check some of that stuff out too, and then kind of take some notes on it and come back and just kind of regroup and watch a little bit more film. Just started doing that last week a little bit more, especially in terms of the quarterbacks. It's a very interesting class, and everybody has flaws.
Yeah, they all do. Let me know how Algiere looks. If he looks rocked up, let me know.
Hey, there we go. All right. Thank you guys for tuning into the show, whether you listen to it live or in your cars. If you are not following these guys on Twitter, go do that. They both have some awesome stuff going on. I love collaborating with different people and hearing different opinions here. So it was really nice to have both guys on. Be back at it again live sometime next week with TBD guest out there, along with some articles on the way. So again, thanks for tuning in, and enjoy the Combine week here, guys.